So recently, Congressman Dan Crenshaw was on Joe Rogan, and for me, this is why, in my personal life, I have some friends who claim to be libertarian, and their libertarian views like rarely ever match what the actual libertarians are spouting for. And Dan Crenshaw is a perfect example of that like libertarian view. I, I really actually implore you to listen to this Joe Rogan, Dan Crenshaw interview, partially because you can hear it from his mouth and not just me paraphrasing what he's saying. But Dan Crenshaw went on to say not only is populism bad, he said if the majority of people want something, it doesn't mean that's what they need. That to
Yeah,
me is disturbing, multiple reasons. But number one, there we go with that psychotic mentality of I know what's better for you.
I am
Yeah,
God.
yes. Number two, that's very anti-democratic. Like
Yes.
that's democracy right there. Then he goes in though into further say that all people must suffer. And part of these stimulus checks and part of this stuff, the government backbone is not allowing for enough suffering by our people. And what I take from that is looking at his voting records. What's one thing that Dan Crenshaw, number one, the first and only bill that Dan Crenshaw has supported in 2021, as well as all other Republicans, by the way, is a cut to estate taxes, which affects about 8,000 people. Because this is all people who are worth over $11 million. This is the only thing they've stood for in 2021. We are 4 months into this goddamn year, and
11 million and sky's the limit is where
yes,
it's going.
yeah, 11 million and up, and it only affects those people. So wait, so they don't need to suffer? The poor people, the guy who's
Yeah, because
going.
there's a real good chance of them suffering on their private island.
Right. Yeah, no. I mean, but they shouldn't suffer at all. We should cut their taxes completely. The guy who's working on construction, the school teacher, the pipe fitter, all them, they should suffer. They should suffer because of something that they had no control over.
Yeah,
Is what Dan
yeah.
Crenshaw is
I
saying.
couldn't believe he said that, considering it's not their fault. This isn't some trial or tribulation they must go through because of their own inaction or action. This is the how could he not think that the stimulus is basically kind of like, oh, we're shutting down businesses and 1/3 of America has been put out of work by basically government mandate, that they don't owe us anything again.
Exactly. And he
I was
questions exactly why we should have government have this much power. And I point to this question to him. What's the point of having government if for not for these kind of situations where they can come in and bail out a really bad situation? Uh, and again, and if you say, well, I don't want that either, okay, cool, but then you don't want the American flag, you don't want America. Because that, unfortunately, that flag, that's what it represents. I'm sorry, but it represents our government. Like, have some pride in that because that is the thing that you get weepy eyed when you think of World War II.
Well, it does. I would say that that doesn't represent, quote, the government. It represents the republic, which is kind of like the one nation of America, of all of us. All creeds, all colors, kind of. It's more of a bonding thing. Uh, I wouldn't want to dirty the flag by equating it with our government.
But
I
that
mean,
is that
generally
is our
speaking.
power source, though. It is. I mean, again, it may not be like that's our mommy and daddy. We may not be friends with
Yeah,
them
no,
all
no.
the
We
time.
default certain things to the government based upon, it's kind of like there's a balance somewhere in between a powerful government that has control and the Wild West. And so you kind of have to figure out somewhere in between what the government should and shouldn't have power to do. And they decided that they wanted to have power to do this. And they took some things away from people, as they are still taking. What's wrong with them giving back?
Yes. Yeah, and he used the same quote that you hear a lot. Well, what happens when when the government starts buying you up with your own money? Okay, that's number one, completely ridiculous. Because another thing that Dan Crenshaw supported, the 2017 tax cuts, the single most unpopular bill in the last decade. And he supported that. Almost 83% of that tax cut benefit goes to the top 1%. Well, how come we're not buying off? What about giving them their own money? How come that's okay? It's a very weird, you know, situation in which you have somebody like Dan Crenshaw who's all about not taking money in, but he's completely against sending money out. Like a
Yeah.
business doesn't work that way, by the way. And
Yeah, I'm sure he
you
would
know,
also say that whatever you pay in taxes, you shouldn't get any kind of refund.
I'm sure he would. Yeah. And when you look too, this is not me. This is actually under Trump in his administration who did this study. I found out that that first stimulus check and the second one, they haven't done one on the third or yet, but they did more to stimulate our economy than anything we've done since FDR's New Deal. Like that's insane. That's insane, but we haven't had anything to stimulate our economy in that manner in 100 years. And that thing is the thing that Crenshaw's against.
Yeah, and it's really not that big of a chunk of money. I mean, when it really comes down to it, a lot of people get more refunds in their taxes for 1 year than they got from the total stimulus divided out at this point. So, yeah, I don't. If that did as well as you say, which I completely believe, that just shows you that people were willing to reinvest that money on everyday things, which is exactly what we need.
And that's the thing too, why stimulus, why they've been effective. And I praised the Trump administration for doing this exact same thing. The same thing that I praised the Biden administration for doing is they're actually giving all the stimulus checks to the bottom, to middle class level families. And those are the ones who spend it. Like this trickle down mentality is just wrong. We've done it since Reagan and it's never worked. We always have an excuse for why we need to go back. Oh, well, I'm sorry. You know what? Reagan did it. Bush did it. Clinton did it. Bush did it again. Obama did it. Trump did it. Biden is probably going to continue doing it. It doesn't work. But what we found out through the stimulus is building bottom up actually works because we don't take our money. Scott, when you got your stimulus check, did you do stock buyback on your corporations and falsely inflate the market? No, you didn't. You bought shit.
I invested in Blow Up Doll Company.
Right? Yeah, I bought a Nicolas Cage pillow. Like
I,
we buy crap, which
I
helps.
paid Pokimane $3,500 as a simp.
We stimulate the economy. When we give all the tax cuts and the things that the libertarians are about, that free market enterprise, they just take that money and send it to China, or they keep it going in the stock market, which affects 0.1% of any of our actual lives. Maybe it affects our pension only when it tanks and we're screwed, but it never affects us for the benefit. Wall Street has never had anything to do with Main Street. And I'm really getting tired of that, like that libertarian mentality that free market just fixes everything. Because free market, and follow me on this, is what gave us TPP, is what gave us these horrible trade deals with China. That's exactly what they've done.
Oh, don't talk about TPP. We'll have to talk about Biden trying to put us back in it.
Oh, I know. I'm disgusted by it. But again, on Dan Crenshaw, it's just I find it very disgusting that this guy feels like you should suffer, but Jeff Bezos shouldn't suffer.
Yeah, it's
What?
kind of like, well, you signed up for this war, buddy. You can, I really don't understand where he's coming from. That's why some of these things that he said about this is basically populism. That's not populism at all, the way he describes it on Rogan.
No, and populism is one of those terms I think you and I both more subscribe to as an ideology, a political ideology that both sides hate. And I think the main reason why is because that's the chink in the armor. Neolibs and neocons understand that populism is the only thing that could beat them now. A true
Right, and,
populist president.
right along with populism, I think that the term nationalism is also been demonized. It's okay to be a homogenous, multiracial mixing pot and be nationalist, be for your country. Other countries don't seem to have an issue with being it. Puerto Ricans don't seem to have a problem with it. It's kind of like, it's okay. You could be populist and nationalist at the same time and be like, this is a wonderful place.
Yeah, I mean, I think I can't subscribe to that as because I don't know the ideology behind nationalism, but I can definitely say with
Well,
like,
there's no ideology. It's just being a lover of your own country. And we're never going to make it the lover of your own racial homogeny. It's you can still be America first. You can still say America
America.
without its with the same connotation as what people think about people who say America.
It's they're saying America, not whites only kind of thing is what you're saying.
Right. Well,
Yeah,
that's a ridiculous thing to even think of. Well, I think we could get there. Yeah.
but
Okay.
but
All right.
I think that's also the that's how they use it against. It's like populism. They often conflate it to socialism,
Right.
which they skip socialism, which I don't know why. Socialism is pretty valid. At least it deserves some scrutiny, but they just skip over it and go to communism. I think it's because they believe that the average person is a moron and doesn't know the difference between socialism and communism, so they just say communist. And yeah, I mean, uh, if that level though, if we have like Trump ran as a populist. If he was a true populist, he could have changed things majorly. When at some point we might get an actual populist who will win over both sides. It will take the common thinking people of both sides, and they're like, well, I don't buy in to the Republican trickle down effect, and I don't buy in to the neo libs and their like propensity for the elites and big corporations. I'm going with that guy. That guy who wants to take care of Americans and
Well,
wants to
even if we
listen
get a
to America.
populist in, he's going to have a large populist support base to get anything done. So, believe it or not, I think it's a lot harder to install a populist Congress, a populist
Right.
in the Supreme Court, and a populist in the Senate. I mean, that's really the battle.
I think the interesting thing part with that would be is that most populists through and through are socialist Dems. And that's like not popular at all. Like you have, I think, potentially on the right, and unfortunately it sucks because he screwed himself over. Was the guy from Missouri? What's his name? Um,
Uh,
oh,
yeah, you just put me on the spot for that one.
sorry, I can't even think of his name. Um,
Is he a governor or is he a congressman
he's a senator.
or senator? Senator.
Um,
Okay.
he stood with Trump in the Stop the Steal thing, and it totally screwed his reputation over. And I don't even know if he's going to win again, but he was headed to very high places, and he was like a right wing populist. He was, um, God, what is his name? It's incredible. I know there's like people who's yelling at the, it's blah blah blah, and I can't even think of his name. Like it's not
Well,
coming
it's
to me.
better not to know it than to get it wrong, like some other people's podcasts. But that's when you really scream.
I can just claim that I'm stoned and busy talking to Dan Crenshaw. um, Josh Hawley. That's it. Yeah,
Right.
yeah. So you had like Josh Hawley, and and that was the weird intersection. Is that on a lot of things, a lot of people didn't realize Josh Hawley, Ro Khanna, AOC, a lot of them actually intersected, and you could actually include Marco Rubio in that. Like, they really did see a lot of things eye to eye. Now, due to the culture war, of course, they weren't allowed to to talk about that. But I mean, if you remember right, the second stimulus check was burned by Bernie Sanders and Josh Hawley. Like, so when populists work together, a lot of things happen, and I think that's the thing that libertarians, neocons, and neolibs are terrified of because collectively, I think we can all agree that Mitch McConnell, Schumer, Pelosi, just start throwing names of these losers, Dan Crenshaw. They all only support one group of people in this country, and it's the elites. It's the big
Yeah.
corporations. It's the
I think
1%.
the core, whatever their core beliefs are as being a pure libertarian, is so far from reality when it comes to just looking at the top 10 companies, Apple, Amazon, Microsoft. You just put those 10 companies and the power that they have, your libertarianism falls flat.
Agreed. And I think that's the weird thing, though, too, is like why I've never been able to subscribe to libertarianism at all is because they get you in with that idea of basically the original American motto, which is mind your own business. And yeah, I like that. That's cool.
Yeah, because that's what
But,
the big tech companies are doing,
but
is minding
yes,
their own business.
exactly. Then it starts to be about free market and taxation, and you start going, yeah, but I'm being taxed. I'm having to pay my fair share.
Alexa,
But
why is life so shitty?
well, let me tell you. No, I mean, it actually, the libertarian to me reminds me of a joke that I heard once, and it's like, if it, it's it's why supporting gay marriage is really easy to do. If there's an earthquake and it kills 20 people, and someone asks you, "Hey, did you hear about the earthquake? What did you think?" And you say, I don't care. It doesn't affect me. People would be like, you're a dick. Jesus Christ. But if they ask you about gay marriage, hey, how do you feel about gay marriage? And you go, I don't care. It doesn't affect me. They're like, oh, you're a hero. What a way to live life. To me, that's like libertarianism. Is like, you can just get by on being like, ah, it doesn't bother me. I don't care. It doesn't affect me. Like, anytime something affects me, then I have a problem with
well,
it.
well, but libertarian is a little different. I mean, if you say you're a classical liberal, that's kind of like do unto yourself as you need to do. It's not necessarily about not caring, but as long as you don't invade my rights or my privacy, you do what you want to do. And whereas the libertarian deal is, well, you know, like you said, well, it's not bothering me, so why should I care?
And it does get in like, and I think like that the base of that is fine. It's when it starts to get into economics, and it's always
Yeah,
about this
the,
like
the economics
idea.
of that just don't work today.
Yeah, it's this whole idea about like free market economics, but no libertarian I know, like Dan Crenshaw for instance, like he could have spent this entire time on Joe Rogan talking about the suffering that Americans need to go through and how apparently we should all be eating out of dumpsters and blah blah blah. Or he could have took the time and talked about antitrust and how we need to break up Google and we need to break, but he didn't. He didn't do any of that stuff. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like the pure basics of what free market capitalism really should be or is defined as libertarian ideology, they're never for that. You know, they're not for antitrust. They might say they are, but they never do anything. How long has Crenshaw been in office? Like, what, 6 years, something like that?
5 or 6 years, yeah.
Yeah, hasn't proposed a single bill. He hasn't said, hey, I want to work with Elizabeth Warren on
Well,
antitrust.
why would he?
You
It
know?
doesn't affect him.
Exactly, exactly.